So here's a tutorial about how to paint some of the Sword and Sorcery Shaman, Orc Shaman. And so as you can see, I spray painted these based on the colors that I want, and that saves me from painting at least one color. If you are just spray and priming these white or gray, the technique is still the same. It just means you're going to have to paint this whole section blue rather than spray painting. So I'll go ahead and do a demonstration about how to layer and dry brush just using this blue shaman. So the first thing I'm going to do is use olive green or any kind of color that you want to paint your orcs and color in all the skin. And it's just going to be a straight, flat color. And the trick to doing block coloring is basically to make it so that the paint goes all the way to the edges, because you don't want there to be a line of blue at the very edges of where the different colors change. And the reason why I'm also doing the skin first is because it's the most recessed. And so what I try to do in painting is to color in the parts of the figure where it's the furthest recessed in, and then work my way out. And that makes it easier to cover these spots without getting paint inadvertently in places that I don't want it to be. And so this is fairly simple. Make sure you keep your brush wet and paint in all of these spots. So I'll go ahead and do that and show you what the next step is. Okay, so I did all of the green, and next I'm going to add some brown to the staff and a couple of the bands, his loincloth, and just do block color out the whole thing. Because especially with blue, there are very few things in the natural world that is blue. So you want to, whereas a lot of things are naturally brown or dark, black is that's why black is sometimes a good base color. But because blue isn't sort of a natural color out there in the world, you want to make sure that none of it is peeking through, because then it will look super unnatural. So I'm going to cover up all of these spots. And the size of my brush during this blocking phase this is a number 3 brush. So it's a pretty big brush so that I can get good coverage. So I'm going to cover that. Also the loincloth here, as well as all of these bandages all around here. And so again, I'll go ahead and finish this up. Alright, so I got all of the brown finished, and next what I'm going to do is use some creamy ivory for the bone. There isn't a lot of bone here, so this shouldn't take very long, but there's the skull here on the staff, or some of them, not all of them. And so I'm going to just go ahead and do that. And the reason why I went ahead and gave this a brown undercoating again is that it's okay if I don't get all of it with this white color and leave some of the shadows brown. So I'd much rather have the shadows be brown than blue, because once again, you're just not going to find blue shadows on most things. So I just sort of hit it up like this. So make sure you do the underside of it as well. And then there's one other spot that I want to color, and that is this knee pad. I am not 100% sure what this is, but I'm just gonna assume it's a piece of bone, and that's why I'm coloring it white. So let's go ahead and do that. And that's pretty much it for this color. So okay, the final piece is I'm going to be using a little bit of shadowed steel to just do this crest right here. And the feature is a little bit mushy, but you can color that in silver. Now, I am not going to paint in the bands on his arms or his belt, because that's going to be black, nor these spots silver yet. These spikes that he has on his arms, wrapping around the fur. I'm going to paint that silver later, as well as the band black. But the reason why I'm not coloring that now is because I'm going to dry brush the blue, and that'll just cover up the black band, and I'll need to go back anyway. And as well, these flames that are coming out of some of their fists, I'm also not coloring them right now, and I'll show you later why. But these are pretty much ready now, because they are block colored in. Block coloring just meaning that it's just one coat, a flat, not trying to highlight or shade or anything like that. But it's pretty much just the colors that I want it to be, because the next step is to go ahead and provide shading. And so how we're going to do that is the easiest way is to use Army Painter. This is different from their oil-based. Make sure you get the ones in these dropper bottles. I have strong tone and dark tone. For this, I'm going to use dark tone, which is a little bit darker than the strong. Just shake it up, and pretty much grabbing our guy here, I actually squirt it right onto his figure, and we'll be moving it around. And I'm going to go ahead and use a larger brush for this, since I'm covering up the whole figure. And so just unscrew the top and grab this guy and just squirt it right on top of him like this. And then grab a big brush like this. I don't know what number it is. I think it's a 6 round. Wet it down a little, and then just move this all around. And what will happen is that the shading will go into the recesses of the figure, and will automatically shade the figure for you. And you have a lot of control over how much of this gets onto the model. But as you can see, I want a lot of it to get on there, and especially for it to go into the cracks and crevices of the figure. So I've already run out. There's a lot that's pulled in this corner. So I'll just move it over here, get it into, and try to shade his skin like that. Oops, sorry. And I will need to apply more. And again, just move it around and make sure it gets into all the crevices. So see how this stuff works and provides shading in a really simple way. And don't worry about the base right now, because we're going to be repainting the base. But that is all there is to shading. This makes it pretty easy. And I'm going to take now sky blue, a lighter, any kind of lighter blue, and now dry brush. So the key to dry brushing is literally to make sure your brush is dry and you're highlighting the raised areas. And this is why we didn't bother painting the black, because then you would just color those bands blue. So just go over all the parts that are blue, just dry brushing, and this effect is pretty subtle. And I don't know how much you're going to be able to tell the difference in the video, but you're basically highlighting all of the spots by dragging this light blue over all of the areas. And again, you don't want the paint to be super heavy. You want to keep your brush pretty dry so that it's only hitting the high spots of the figure. And where there's texture, a lot of texture like there is here on this fur, this effect works really, really well. It's harder to do when there isn't any texture and the surface is all flat. And I'll show you an example of that. But basically this is how you put highlights onto the figure. And then once I sort of do the general area the way that I want, I will use some white, and for my black and white I just use this cheap craft paint because I use so much of it and it's more economical. So I'm going to mix a little bit of white to lighten up the blue even more. So keeping my brush relatively dry, and by adding a little bit of white, what will happen is it will, and then just do this really lightly because you don't want too much of this stuff going on. And again, it's hard to tell a difference on the video, but what you're doing is just highlighting the edges really lightly to make it stand out just a little bit more. And so that's pretty much what it looks like there. One thing to note about red is do not mix white with red to create more highlights, because pink is actually not the highlight of red, it's actually orange. So what you want to do is mix orange or yellow in with your red to create the highlights for anything that's red, because pink just won't look right. So you want to make sure that you're highlighting with orange and not with red. Pretty much everything else you can highlight just by adding white to it, but with red you definitely want to use orange or yellow as your mix rather than just adding white, because it'll, you don't want pink to be your highlight color. Next, what I'm going to do is the skin. And so I'm going to take the original olive green that I had and lighten it a little bit up with my white and highlight the skin. Now, because the skin isn't as textured as this cape, you have to be a little bit more careful, but you're still, the concept of dry brushing is still there, where you're highlighting any spots where sort of the light source from above would lighten up the skin color. So I'm just going to run a pretty dry brush so that it picks up some of the highlights and details of the skin. But I'm keeping the crevices darker. That was made darker by the tone, the dark tone, and I'm just highlighting the skin here. And that's pretty much it. One thing that I don't like about this figure is most of the details are actually hidden when you put these on the table. Because when you put them on the table, you can't even really see this face. So this isn't the best sculpt in the world. I do prefer these regular orcs. The sculpt is way better for these guys. But the shaman, all the detail of the muscles down here are actually hidden when you place them on the table. So this is really all that you see. And now I'm going to highlight the brown. And so I just mix a little bit of white in with the original color. And instead of so much dry brushing, I'm just going to draw bands like this, just across the top of one side. And that sort of mimics these bandages going around. And so I don't do that. I don't bother doing that for the bottom because these highlights will only be on the side where the light source is coming. And so I'll do that with both the arm and down here at the bottom. They have similar bands right across here with this leg, just one side. And so I'll just paint these lines across like this. And again, you're not going all the way around, just on one side where there is the light is hitting it. And so you don't have to. And then for this piece, even though technically it's all one piece, it's not banded, I'll go ahead and band like this, just because I think it looks better. And then you want to highlight this part, just sort of the lower edges of his loincloth like this. That highlights that, and then up here at the top as well. You just want to highlight and draw some lines in here to highlight this portion of it. Like that. See? And then he has more bands here on this leg. And across here. Just like that. And that's pretty much it. You can highlight the staff, but I'm not doing that because what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten up this brown even more so that I have sort of a white that is more beige in color, and I'm only coloring the rope or the cloth strips. And the reason why I lightened it up a lot is because I want it to have high contrast compared to the rest of the staff. So there's some cloth there, and then some cloth down here that I want to color in. That's holding what looks like a spade, a hand shovel or something. And then just do it on the other side as well. And yeah, this here is actually a piece of cloth right here. And you don't have to be as meticulous on the underside because you're only going to see this when they're knocked out and you have to flip the mini over. So I don't really spend as much time underneath where you're not seeing it regularly. But that's basically how I want the staff to be. And I'm going to keep the skull sort of this darkened white color just to contrast it to the bands that I just painted in. Next I'm going to do the black, and that is his belt across his mid-waist. And then this going across his chest with spiky stuff on it. And then there's two bands here holding whatever's on his knee, whatever that piece is. Then he has another one across his other calf, which is spiky. And then I'm going to switch to a smaller brush to do his arm bands on the arm that's grabbing the staff. He has two of them right here. Now I use zinc to paint my base, and I do flock some of my bases so that it has gravel and stone, as well as some flocking, some static grass. But for figures that I'm trying to get out as fast as possible, I don't bother doing that, and I just paint it gray like this. And I will need 2 coats of this. And you just want to make sure not to get it onto the figure. So I'll go ahead and do 2 coats of this, and after that I will spray dull coat on them and finish off. After the dull coat is dry, I do 2 coats of dull coat to take the shine off of them, and then after it's dry I will finish off with any details of either white on the teeth as well as silver. And the reason why I spray dull coat before I put the silver on is because I don't want the silver paint to be dulled. I want it to maintain its shine, so that's why I don't put the silver on, the final coat of silver on, until after the dull coat is sprayed on there. Now that these are sprayed, I go ahead and do final touch-ups. And so I actually grab a lighter silver, and this brand is Army Painter, a plate mail metal, and I will just highlight the crust here, not the whole thing. And then there are spikes. There are spikes on this arm, and then along this belt that goes across his chest. So I'm just touching each just to dot it a little bit. And then as well for the band around his leg. So I'm just highlighting and touching the bumps along there, like that. Oh, and don't forget to do this part silver as well, whatever, it's like a spade. And then I just take the yellow. There's a couple of figures that have these flames coming out of their hands, and I color it first with really light yellow, the flame marks. And once this is dry, I will use orange just to highlight it. So just yellow, make sure there's none of the undercolor showing through, in this case blue. So it looks like flames. And if you get some on the hand, that's fine, because that's sort of reflecting the light from the flame. And so Doesn't matter if you're a little sloppy with it. And then once you get that yellow in there, go ahead and grab some orange. And with the orange, you just want to highlight just some of the tops and the edges. You want to keep some of the yellow there, like that. There's better ways to do flame, but this is a quick and dirty method.